The space station called Horizon's Edge floated in the darkness between stars. It was old and very large. Thousands of aliens from many different worlds lived and worked there. Ships came and went every hour, carrying goods and travelers from one corner of the galaxy to another. Among all these strange creatures, humans were still new. They'd only joined the galactic community a few decades ago. Most alien species did not think much of them. Humans were small. They lived short lives. They came from a single planet that most species had never heard of. But humans had one thing that made them useful. They could fix things. Park, though Yoon stood in the lower maintenance bay of the station. His hands were covered in grease, and his back hurt from bending over old machines all day. He was 34 years old, with tired eyes and a gentle face. He had been an engineer on Earth before joining the colony ship New Bazan. Now he was here, far from home, trying to make a living among the stars. He was not alone. 2 other humans worked beside him in the cramped space. Kim, Yuna, was younger, maybe 28. She had quick hands and an even quicker mind. She could listen to an engine and tell you exactly what was wrong with it. The other aliens thought this was strange magic. Yuna just called it paying attention. Lee Taiwan was the oldest of the 3. He was 42, with gray hair on his temples and scars on his fingers from years of hard work. He had fixed machines his whole life. Back on Earth, he had worked in factories. In space, the machines were different, but the work was the same. Find the problem. Fix it. Move on to the next one. The 3 of them had come to Horizon's Edge 6 months ago. They had signed a labor contract that promised good pay and the chance to learn from advanced alien technology. The reality was different. The station administrators had put them in the lowest levels. They gave them the worst jobs. They fixed machines that other species refused to touch because they were too old or too dirty. The pay was less than promised. The food was bad. Their quarters were small and cold, but they did not complain. They did their work. They did it well. The station was run by a species called the Korath. They were tall creatures that looked like insects. They had hard shells covering their bodies and many small eyes. They moved in quick, jerky motions that made humans uncomfortable. The Korath believed they were better than everyone else. They had ruled this section of space for thousands of years. They looked down on younger species, especially humans. To them, humans were like children who had wandered into a room full of adults. Administrator Vexilon was the Korath, in charge of Horizon's Edge. He was even taller than most of his kind, with a shell that gleamed dark purple. When he walked through the station, other beings moved out of his way. He rarely spoke to humans. When he did, his voice was cold and sharp. 2 weeks ago, Vexilon had ordered the human mechanics to repair a life support system in Sector 7. This sector was home to 3,000 Korath colonists. The system was old and had been breaking down for months. Previous repair teams had failed to fix it properly. Daiheen and his team had worked on it for 3 days straight. They barely slept. They replaced broken parts. They rewired damaged circuits. They even found ways to make the system work better than before. When they finished, the life support system ran perfectly. Yuna had documented everything they did, every part they touched, every change they made. She kept careful records because she knew the Korath did not trust humans. For 2 weeks, everything was fine. Then, in the middle of the night, alarms began to scream. Do-hyun woke up to the sound of his door being broken down. Korath guards rushed into his small room. Their hard feet clicked against the metal floor. Before he could speak, they grabbed him and put restraints on his wrists. In the hallway, he saw Yuna and Taiwan being dragged from their rooms as well. Yuna was shouting questions that no one answered. Taiwan was silent, his face hard and angry. The guards took them through the station's corridors. Other beings stopped and stared. A few whispered to each other. The humans were being treated like criminals, but no one knew why. They were thrown into a detention cell in the lowest part of the station. The cell was small and dark. The walls were bare metal. There was no furniture except for a single bench. The door closed with a heavy sound. Then there was silence. Yuna pressed her hands against the door. It was cold enough to hurt. She pulled back and looked at the others. Doyun sat down on the bench slowly. His mind was racing. What had happened? What had they done wrong? Taiwan stood in the corner, his arms crossed over his chest. His breath made small clouds in the cold air. The cell was not made for humans. It was made for species with thicker skin. Nobody came to explain what was happening. Nobody came to ask them questions. They simply sat in the cold and the dark and waited. Hours passed. Or maybe it was days. It was hard to tell. Somewhere above them, in the comfortable warmth of his office, Administrator Vexilon had made his decision. The life support system in Sector 7 had failed. 53 Korath had been hurt before backup systems activated. Someone had to be blamed. The humans had touched the system last. That was enough for Vexilon. He did not need to investigate further. He did not need to look at records or evidence. Humans were lesser beings. Of course, they had made a mistake. He did not know that his decision would bring something terrible down upon his station. He did not know that far away, in the cold depths of space, someone was already watching, and that someone was very, very angry. The cell grew colder as time passed. Yuna had stopped trying to stay warm. She sat against the wall with her knees pulled up to her chest. Her fingers had turned slightly blue at the tips. This was not good, she knew. But there was nothing she could do about it. Taiwan paced back and forth across the small space. 5 steps one way, 5 steps back. His boots made soft sounds against the metal floor. He had not spoken much since they were thrown in here. His face was like stone, but his eyes burned with quiet anger. Doyun sat on the bench and stared at the wall. He was thinking about the life support system. He remembered every wire they had touched, every seal they had replaced, every test they had run before leaving. They had done everything right. He was certain of it. So, what had gone wrong? A small slot at the bottom of the door opened. A tray slid through with 3 small containers of something that might have been food. The slot closed immediately. No words were spoken. Yuna crawled over and looked at the containers. The food inside was gray and thick like paste. It smelled strange. She pushed one toward Dohin and another toward Taiwan. They ate because they had to. The food had no taste. It sat heavy in their stomachs like wet sand. 3 days passed this way. Maybe 4. The lights in the cell never changed. There were no windows. The only way to measure time was by the trays of food that appeared twice each day. Taiwan developed a cough on the 2nd day. By the 4th day, it had grown worse. His chest rattled when he breathed. His skin had taken on a gray color that worried Yuna deeply. She had seen this before. The cold was getting into his lungs. She banged on the door with her fists. She shouted for help. She demanded to see a doctor. No one answered. No one came. On the 5th day, a voice finally spoke through a small speaker in the ceiling. It was Administrator Vexilon. His voice was flat and cold, like metal scraping against metal. He told them they were accused of sabotaging the life support system in Sector 7. He told them 53 Korath had been injured because of their failure. He told them they would face punishment. Dong stood up quickly. His voice was rough from days of silence. He asked about a trial. He asked about their right to defend themselves. He asked about the maintenance records that proved they had done nothing wrong. The speaker went silent. Vexilon did not answer any questions. The conversation, if it could be called that, was over. Yuna felt something cold settle in her chest. It was not the temperature this time. It was fear. Real fear. The Korath were not interested in the truth. They just wanted someone to blame. Far away from the station, beyond several star systems, the news was spreading. A Valorian trade ship had been docked at Horizon's Edge when the humans were arrested. The crew had seen the 3 workers being dragged through the corridors. They had asked questions. They had learned what happened. When their ship left the station, they carried the story with them. The Valorians were an old species. They had traveled among the stars for longer than most civilizations had existed. They were tall beings with gray skin and 4 arms. Their eyes changed color based on their emotions. Blue for calm, green for curiosity, orange for anger, red for rage. They remembered their own history. Long ago, they had been treated badly by other species too. They had been called primitive. They had been pushed aside. They had been used and discarded. It had taken them centuries to prove their worth. Because of this history, the Valorians paid attention when younger species were mistreated. They watched. They remembered. And sometimes they acted. Commander Relax received the report aboard his flagship, the Eternal Resolve. It was a massive ship, larger than most space stations. It carried a crew of thousands and weapons that could destroy small moons. Relax was old, even by Valorian standards. He had seen many things in his long life. He had watched species rise and fall. He had fought in wars that younger beings only knew from history files. But something about this report made him stop. Humans, 3 human mechanics, imprisoned without trial, held in conditions that could kill them, accused without evidence. Relax had met humans before. He had worked with them. He had studied their short but remarkable history. Unlike most species in the galaxy, he understood what humans really were. They were not just another young species learning their place. They were something special, something rare. The Valorians had a word for it. There was no perfect translation, but the closest meaning was makers. Humans were makers. They looked at problems that others accepted as impossible. They found solutions that others could not imagine. They built and fixed and improved everything they touched. And now 3 of these makers were sitting in a freezing cell, slowly dying because an arrogant insect refused to check his own records. Relax's eyes shifted color. First orange, then a deep burning red. He gave the order to change course. The Eternal Resolve turned slowly in the darkness of space. Its engines lit up with blue fire. It began moving toward Horizon's Edge. The crew did not question the order. When the commander's eyes turned red, questions were not wise. Back in the cell, Yuna held Taiwan's hand. His cough had grown worse. His breathing was shallow and weak. She whispered to him, telling him to hold on. Help would come. Someone would realize the mistake. She did not really believe it, but she said it anyway. Dohyun sat alone in the corner. He had stopped thinking about the life support system. He had stopped thinking about evidence and records. Now, he just thought about survival. How long could they last in this cold? How long before Taiwan's sickness became too serious? How long before their bodies simply gave up? He did not know that help was already coming. He did not know that a warship was cutting through space toward them. He did not know that a Valorian commander had heard their story and decided that enough was enough. All he knew was the cold, the hunger, the darkness. And the terrible feeling that no one in the galaxy cared whether they lived or died. He was wrong about that. Someone cared, and that someone was bringing a very large ship full of very angry Valorians. The Eternal Resolve dropped out of hyperspace without any warning. One moment, the space around Horizon's Edge was empty and quiet. The next moment, a ship the size of a small city appeared in a flash of blue light. Alarms screamed across the station. Controllers rushed to their screens. Messages flew back and forth in a dozen different languages. No one had expected this. No one had been told a Valorian warship was coming. Administrator Vexilon stood in the command center and watched the massive ship through the viewing window. His many eyes blinked rapidly. His mandibles clicked together in a nervous rhythm. The Valorian flagship was 10 times larger than his station. Its weapons alone could turn Horizon's Edge into dust. A communication came through. The voice was calm but firm. "This is Commander Relics of the Valorian Starfleet. I am coming aboard. Have your senior staff ready to meet me in your command center in 1 hour." The message ended. There was no request for permission. There was no polite conversation. This was not a friendly visit. Vexilon's staff looked at him with worried eyes. No one knew what to do. The Valorians were a powerful species. They had treaties with almost every civilization in the galaxy. They did not make demands without reason. 1 hour later, a Valorian shuttle docked at the station's main port. The doors opened and Commander Relax walked out, followed by 6 armed guards. Relax was tall, even for his species. His gray skin was marked with old scars from battles long past. He wore a simple uniform with no medals or decorations. He did not need such things. Everyone knew who he was. His eyes were orange. This was not a good sign. He walked through the station corridors with long steps. Other beings moved out of his way quickly. His guards marched behind him in perfect formation. Their weapons were not drawn, but they were ready. Vexilon met him at the entrance to the command center. The administrator tried to stand tall, but Relax was still taller. He tried to look confident, but his mandibles kept clicking. "Commander, this is an unexpected visit. How can we help you?" Relax did not waste time with greetings. His voice was hard as stone. "You are holding 3 human workers in your detention block. I want to know why." Vexilon's eyes shifted slightly. He had not expected this. The humans? Why would a Valorian commander care about 3 human mechanics? That is an internal station matter. The humans damaged a critical life support system. 53 of our people were injured. We are handling the situation according to our laws. Relax's eyes grew darker. The orange was turning red at the edges. "Show me the evidence." Vexilon hesitated. Evidence? He had not really collected evidence. He had simply blamed the humans because they were the easiest target. The thought of actually proving their guilt had not crossed his mind. The investigation is still ongoing. "We have not yet. Show me the evidence." Now there was no room for argument in that voice. Relax was not asking. He was commanding. And Vexilon realized with growing fear that he could not refuse. The next 3 hours were painful for the administrator. Relax demanded every piece of data connected to the life support failure. He wanted maintenance logs. He wanted system reports. He wanted records of who had worked on the system and when. He wanted to see everything. Vexilon's staff scrambled to gather the information. They pulled files from computer systems. They printed reports. They brought data tablets and projection screens. Relax studied it all with careful attention. His 4 hands moved quickly across the screens. His eyes scanned lines of data faster than anyone could follow. He was old, but his mind was still sharp, and the more he read, the angrier he became. The maintenance logs were clear. Park Doyan and his team had done excellent work on the life support system. They had replaced worn parts. They had fixed old damage. They had improved the efficiency of the whole system. Their records were detailed and complete. Every action was documented, but there was more. Relax found records from before the humans arrived. 6 months before their work, a Korath team had installed a new component in the system. They had done it incorrectly. The installation was rushed and sloppy. The component had been failing slowly ever since, getting worse each month. When the life support finally broke down, it was because of the Korath's own mistake. The humans had nothing to do with it. In fact, if the humans had not improved the rest of the system, the failure would have been much worse. Relax turned to face Vexilon. The administrator took a step back. He had never seen eyes that color before. It was beyond red. It was a deep, dark crimson that seemed to glow with inner fire. You imprisoned human mechanics? The words came out slowly. Each one hit like a hammer. You blamed them for a failure caused by your own people. You threw them in a cell without a trial. You did not look at the evidence. You did not check the records. You just assumed they were guilty because they were human. Vexilon's voice was weak. Commander, you did not let them speak in their defense. You did not give them proper food or warmth. You put them in conditions that could kill them. Relax stepped forward. Vexilon stepped back until he hit the wall. Do you have any idea what you have done? The command center was completely silent. Every Korath in the room stood frozen. They had never seen their administrator look so afraid. And somewhere below them, in the cold darkness of the detention block, 3 humans waited. They did not know that their lives were about to change. They did not know that justice was coming. They only knew that they were cold and hungry and alone, but not for much longer. Vexilon's mandibles clicked rapidly. He pressed himself against the wall as Commander Relax stood over him. The Valorian's eyes burned like dark fire. They are merely workers, the administrator managed to say. His voice was thin and weak. They are just humans. Young species. They make mistakes. Everyone knows this. Relax went very still. The kind of still that comes before a storm. Merely workers? Just humans? He turned away from Vexilon and walked to the center of the command room. Every Korath in the room watched him with wide, frightened eyes. He raised one of his 4 arms and activated the holographic display system. The air filled with light and images. Data streams floated around the room like glowing rivers. Pictures appeared. Videos played. Records from 100 different worlds filled the space. Let me educate you, Administrator. Since your species seems unable to learn on its own, Relax pointed to the first set of images. They showed a Valorian ship from many years ago. Its engines were large and complicated, built from technology that had taken the Valorians 400 years to develop. This is our quantum drive system. We created it over centuries of careful research. It is one of our greatest achievements. We thought no one could understand it better than us. The image changed. Now it showed a human woman in a small laboratory. Her hair was messy. Her clothes were simple. She was surrounded by screens and notes and models of engine parts. This human scientist studied our drive system. She asked questions we had never thought to ask. She found problems we had never noticed. In 18 months, she improved our design by 15%. 80 months. Do you understand? It took us 400 years to build it. It took one human less than 2 years to make it better. Vexilon said nothing. His eyes moved from image to image. Relax continued. The display changed again, showing medical equipment this time. Our stasis pods were considered perfect. We used them for centuries. Then human doctors looked at them. They changed a few small things. They adjusted the power flow. They modified the life support connections. Now our pods work 30% better. Patients wake up healthier. Recovery time is shorter. All because humans looked at something we thought was finished and found ways to improve it. More images appeared. Human engineers working on alien ships. Human scientists studying strange technology. Human mechanics fixing machines that other species had given up on. You know why every advanced civilization wants human workers? It is not because they are cheap. It is not because they are easy to control. It is because humans see things differently. Relax walked closer to Vexilon again. His voice grew quieter but somehow more dangerous. When your people look at a machine, you see what it does. When humans look at a machine, they see what it could do. They see possibilities. They find solutions to problems that others do not even recognize as problems. He pulled up the maintenance logs from the life support system. The records that Yuna had kept so carefully. These 3 humans that you threw in a cell? They did not just fix your life support system. Look at these records. They improved it. They made changes that will extend its life by 15 years. They did this without being asked. They did it without extra pay. They did it simply because they saw a way to make something better. The room was completely silent. Not a single Korath moved or spoke. And how did you repay them? You accused them of a crime they did not commit. You ignored the evidence. You put them in a cell designed for species with thick skin. You gave them food that barely keeps them alive. You let one of them get sick from the cold. Rylax's eyes were still that terrible dark red. You know what the rest of the galaxy calls humans? They call them fixers, makers, problem solvers. A single human mechanic can repair things that would take your engineers years to understand. A single human scientist can make discoveries that change entire fields of study. A single human worker can improve systems that other species consider finished. He turned to face the room full of Korath officers and administrators, and you treated 3 of them like animals. Because you were too proud to check your own records. Because you needed someone to blame. Because you thought they were beneath you. Vexilon finally found his voice. We did not know. We did not understand. Relax looked at him with something close to disgust. That is exactly the problem, Administrator. You did not try to know. You did not want to understand. You looked at humans and saw small, weak creatures with short lives. You never bothered to look deeper. He moved toward the door. The humans will be released immediately. They will receive medical care. They will receive proper food and rest. And then you and I will discuss what happens next. Wait, Vexilon called out. His voice had a desperate edge now. What do you mean? What happens next? Relax stopped at the door. He did not turn around. You broke the Human Cooperative Treaty. Every species that signed that agreement promised to treat human workers with basic dignity. You did not do this. There will be consequences, but we did not know about. The treaty was sent to every station administrator in this sector. You received it 3 years ago. It is not my fault that you did not bother to read it. Relax walked out of the room. His guards followed in perfect formation. Behind him, Vexilon stood alone in the center of his command room. His staff stared at him with uncertain eyes. The holographic displays still glowed with images of human achievements. The administrator realized, too late, that he had made a terrible mistake. He had thought humans were unimportant. He had thought no one would care what happened to 3 mechanics. He had been very, very wrong. And now the consequences were coming. The door to the detention cell opened with a heavy sound. Bright light poured in, making the 3 humans cover their eyes with their hands. Dongyun stood up slowly. His body ached from days of sitting on cold metal. Beside him, Yuna helped Taiwan to his feet. The older man could barely stand. His breathing was rough and his skin was pale. 2 Valorian medics entered the cell. They were gentle and quick. They wrapped warm blankets around the humans. They helped Taiwan onto a floating stretcher. They spoke in soft voices, telling them that everything would be all right now. Yuna started to cry. She did not make any sound. The tears just rolled down her cheeks as she was led out of the cold darkness. Dahyun walked out last. He stopped at the door and looked back at the cell that had been their prison. Then he turned away and did not look back again. The Valorian medical bay was warm and bright. Real doctors checked their bodies. They gave Taiwan medicine for his sick lungs. They gave all three of them hot food and clean water. They let them sleep in real beds with soft blankets. For the first time in many days, the humans felt safe that Commander Relax did not visit them right away. He had other work to do first. He sent a formal complaint to the Galactic Council. The document was long and detailed. It described exactly what Administrator Vexilon had done. It listed every rule he had broken. It included copies of the maintenance records that proved the humans were innocent. The Galactic Council responded quickly. They were not happy. Horizon's Edge had been an important trade station. Ships from dozens of worlds used it every day. But now, because of Vexilon's actions, that would change. 17 species announced they would stop sending workers to Korath stations. They did not trust the Korath to treat their people fairly. The trade contracts that Horizon's Edge depended on began to disappear one by one. The council called for a formal investigation. Vexilon was removed from his position. He would face a tribunal for breaking interspecies labor laws. The punishment could include heavy fines and permanent removal from any position of authority, all because he refused to check his records before blaming 3 mechanics. 1 week after the rescue, Commander Relax finally came to see the humans. Do-hyun was sitting in a small room aboard the Eternal Resolve. The room had windows that looked out at the stars. He had been watching them for hours, thinking about everything that had happened. The door opened and Relax entered. The Valorian commander looked different now. His eyes were a soft blue color that Do-hyun had not seen before. "May I sit?" Relax asked. Do-hyun nodded. The commander settled into a chair across from him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "I am sorry," Relax said finally. His voice was quiet. "I am sorry that you experienced this. The galaxy can be cruel to those it does not understand." Do-hyun shook his head slowly. "You saved us. You came when no one else would." "I don't think sorry is the word I would use," Relax smiled. It was a strange expression on his gray face, but somehow warm. "My people remember what it is like to be treated badly. Long ago, other species looked at us the way the Korath looked at you. They thought we were primitive. They thought we were unimportant. It took us a very long time to prove them wrong." He leaned forward slightly. "But humans are different. You do not need centuries to prove your worth. You show it every day, in small ways that others barely notice. A system that works better. A problem that gets solved. A machine that runs longer than anyone expected." Do-hyun thought about the life support system. All those long hours of work, all those careful improvements that Yuna had recorded, were just mechanics, he said. "We fix things. That's all." Relax's smile grew wider. "That, Mr. Park, is exactly the point. Where other species see broken machines, you see possibilities. Where others accept limits, you find solutions. You do not fix things because you are told to. You make them better because you cannot help yourself. It is simply who you are." He stood up and walked to the window. "The Korath imprisoned you because they were afraid of what they did not understand. They saw humans doing work that their own engineers could not do. They saw you improving systems that they considered perfect. It made them feel small. And when the failure happened, they needed someone to blame." Do-hyun joined him at the window. The stars seemed brighter than he remembered. "What happens now?" "The galaxy will learn," Relax said. "Some lessons simply take longer than others. But I think this lesson will spread quickly. After what happened here, many species will think twice before mistreating human workers." He turned to face Do-hyun directly. "I have a proposal for you. The Valorian Starfleet needs skilled mechanics. People who can solve problems. People who can make things better. I would like you and your team to join my ship as technical consultants." Do-hyun stared at him. He could not believe what he was hearing. Really? After everything that happened? Because of everything that happened. Rylax's eyes shifted to a warm green color. I want my crew to see what humans can do when they are treated with respect. I want them to learn from you. And I want the rest of the galaxy to see that the Valorians know how to recognize true value when we find it. 6 months later, Dohun stood in the engine room of the Eternal Resolve. Beside him, Yuna was studying a complex cooling system. Taiwan, fully recovered now, was explaining something to a group of young Valorian engineers. Their first major project had been redesigning the ship's engine cooling system. The Valorians had been using the same design for 200 years. They thought it was as good as it could be. Do-hyun and his team had improved it by 40%. The Valorian engineers had watched them work with wonder in their many-colored eyes. They had asked countless questions. They had taken careful notes. They were learning something that their species had forgotten long ago. Nothing is ever finished. Everything can be made better. Do-hyun looked out at the stars through the engine room window. Somewhere out there, Administrator Vexilon was facing the consequences of his choices. Somewhere out there, other species were starting to see humans in a new way. And here, aboard a Valorian flagship, 3 mechanics from a colony ship called New Bazan were showing the galaxy what humans could do. Not with weapons. Not with power. Not with anger or revenge. Just with skilled hands, creative minds, and the simple desire to make things better. That, Do-hyun thought, was the most human thing of all.